Well, welcome to the Calvary Chapel Salmon podcast. I'm joined here with Hagen. Hagen, how are you?
I'm good, Jordan. How are you?
I'm good. How was your weekend in McCall this past weekend?
It was snowy.
Was it?
The night I was there, probably about 10 inches of snow fell that night. I felt like a real silly person because I left Salmon with shorts on and some Vans.
Okay.
And I roll into McCall and there's already a foot of snow on the ground. And it's snowing, and I want to go to Albertsons. Some would call it the supermarket. I want to go to Albertsons.
Yes.
And it's like, I got to change my clothes before I go because people are going to think I'm weird. So I put pants on and my boots.
Okay, so you had boots and pants.
Yeah, I planned ahead, but I thought this will be nice. And I bought these new shorts from Ross that I wanted to try out.
Oh, wow.
So I guess I'll have to debut them in Mexico instead of McCall.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was a good weekend. I taught on the rapture.
Nice.
The three places where we see the rapture mentioned in the Bible, kind of directly in the New Testament, and then 6 reasons why it's pre-tribulational.
Oh, wow.
So gave a little study on that for the people there in McCall, and quick time, good time. And you stayed here and held down the fort while I was gone. And what'd you teach on?
Taught on Jacob wrestling with God. It was a good time. And at the beginning of both messages, I challenged anyone to come up and wrestle me.
Did anyone take you up on it?
It looked like there could be some takers.
Oh, wow.
No one got up there, but people looked excited. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no one did. Yeah. But I said if they beat me, they would have to finish the message.
Wow.
So I think that was a deterrent because no one else probably had anything prepared.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Way to get him.
Well, today, Hagen, I want to...
This week is one of my favorite holidays that didn't go so well for me.
Oh, you want to talk about this?
Yeah, St. Patrick's Day is actually something I look forward to every year. It's just kind of a good spring holiday. It's like winter's over. Things are generally getting better. And one of my favorite meals ever is corned beef. Like, I just love it. It's like a ham of the beef world. I just think it's so tasty. I never had it growing up, and then I had it a lot. It's like, this is going to be great. I get it every year. But I was just so busy last week. It's like, and I went to Safeway last Monday to see if it was there a week in advance. Didn't have it out yet because they don't update for the week's flyer, then sales till Tuesday.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, I'm a day early, whatever, no corned beef in sight. So I go about my day, go about my week, go to McCall, come back Monday, go about my day, go to young adults, troubleshoot some Wi-Fi issues here at the school. I'm going to swing by Safeway, get 3 corned beefs, put them in the freezer, back from Mexico. I'm just going to eat these things. It'll be great because I don't have really time to eat them before we go to Mexico. I go to Safeway, and sure enough, here's where they're supposed to be in the cooler. Says it on the sign, all gone.
No.
All of them are gone.
Oh, man.
It was the worst St. Patrick's Day ever. And I don't even know. So I'm going to maybe try the market. I'm sure they have some sort of organic corned beef for $50 a pound.
Yeah.
That maybe I can at least get.
Did you consider maybe doing some Lucky Charms instead? That's also a very St. Patty's Day meal.
It is a very St. Patrick's Day meal, but I'm just trying to really focus on that protein goal.
Okay.
And I think the beef will hit that way better than the Lucky Charms.
Probably.
So that's been a bit of a bummer this week. And I'm just thinking, because it's like the only time you can get it, really. So I like lost my chance.
I do enjoy corned beef too.
You put it in the crock pot, put some cabbage in there, some potatoes. You come home after work, it's all ready.
Yeah.
Cut it up, put some in the fridge for the next couple days. It's just great. It's just a good meal. But
here we are. Well, maybe they'll do another week because they know people are in the mood.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Yeah. I said that this morning at school. What's Justice's brother's name?
Aaron.
Aaron goes, that's because my dad took it all.
Oh,
that's the problem.
You were telling the kids at school?
Yeah, I told them yesterday was terrible.
Wow.
I really just been looking forward to this for quite a while, and it's like not going to happen. So,
well, I'm sorry. That's quite a bummer.
Yeah.
Man. Well, I've been looking forward to this podcast for quite a while.
Okay.
I have been, yes. Because today we are going to be beginning a new adventure, a new series together. We covered the entire Bible. We talked about Revelation, and we did all sorts of fun things in between that.
What do you do when you talk about the whole Bible? You talk about something else. Just kidding.
And so now we want to talk about, it's like, what does Hagen know a lot about? That's the question I asked myself. What's Hagen kind of an expert on? What could Hagen just talk about forever? And I realized that Hagen knows a lot about many things, but in particular, he knows a lot about Mormonism and the LDS Church. And we're having technical difficulties. You just want me to turn it off? Oh, okay, we're good. Well, he knows a lot about the LDS Church.
Spirit of Moroni coming.
Oh no,
taking over our sign.
Oh no! And I realized this, Hagen. I don't often think of you as a.
You're fine.
I'm freaked out. I don't think of you.
Should I just unplug it? Maybe
just unplug it. Thank you. Okay.
We'll fix that.
Yes. I don't think of you as a Mormon convert.
Do you really?
And that's kind of a big deal in your life, but like that almost that never crosses my mind.
Wow.
And I relate it to this. I relate it to my younger brother, Jonathan, who only has one leg. Right. Okay. And like, that's a big deal for people when they meet Jonathan. It's like, oh shoot, he only has one leg. Yeah. But for me, like, I never think about that. Yeah. Like never. Like. I
mean, sure, his closet's full of left-footed shoes, but
because it's just like this big thing. But it's just like I just grew up with it.
Do you even know which leg he has?
He has I think he's missing his right leg.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Sorry, Jonathan, if you're watching. My bad. But it's just like I always think of him as just like
the whole person.
Shut up. This normal guy.
Kidding, Jonathan.
Yeah,
he is normal.
Yes, he's very normal, very cool. And it's just like this big thing in his life, but it's just like I'm just used to it. I feel like that's kind of how it is with you. It's like, yeah, it's kind of a big deal that you grew up in the Mormon Church and now you're out of it and now you're a pastor. But it's just like, oh yeah. It's just Hagen. I never think about it.
Wow.
So yeah, that's kind of a cool deal.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to, well, let's do it like this. There's a lot of things we could talk about with Mormonism, but I figured it would probably be beneficial if we stayed kind of focused, kind of locked in on maybe particular topics. So could I like interview you, Hagen, and ask you some questions, or you just kind of tell me the story and I'll just sit back and listen?
Sure. Yeah. I just want to say out of the gate, though, maybe the motive or the reasoning for this.
Yeah.
And it's not to make fun of anyone. And maybe I might make a few jokes, but that's just my personality.
Yeah.
It's not to make fun of anyone. It's not to expose or air dirty laundry. It's hopefully to inform Christians on what maybe their LDS friends or neighbors or family believe. And I would also, and I don't even know how this would work, but if I say anything in these podcasts that is not true, like Mormons don't actually believe that, challenge me and I guarantee you I'll correct it. But because there's this like what we believe and then there's like what we believe, and I'm going to be talking about both. So if your prophet taught it or it was talked about in church history, then it's liable to come up, and we'll address that. And even if it's something that like they're not even a fan of today, like polygamy, what they did do, I'll try to like mention that.
Sure.
But just because you're not a fan of it today doesn't mean it didn't happen. It doesn't mean that Joey and Brigham weren't a big fan of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, that's why you're such a good person to talk to this about, because a person could spend their whole life studying the Mormon religion, but then people would just say, oh, well, you don't really know what it's like. You're not Mormon. You're just against it. You're just an outsider. But for you, like, you grew up in it for 16 years.
Yeah.
You know it all. You believed it all. And so it's like you don't have like this. People can't accuse you of having like this intense bias because it's just like, I just know this stuff.
Yeah. And I don't have any. For the most part, I don't have any animosity towards my upbringing, and I'm thankful for it. And it gave me good morality, and it gave me good structure, and it gave me safety, and it produced a good kid, honestly, for the most part. So I don't look at that and be like, man, I wish I wasn't raised a Mormon. Like, I see it as an asset to my testimony and to my life, even now as an adult, that was the lifestyle I was raised in. So I'm grateful for that. I'm glad I'm out of it, but I'm grateful for it. So yeah,
that's cool. Yeah. So yeah, let's just dive right into it. The topic I want to kind of ask you about and pick your brain about today is the topic of Mormon history, the origins of the church, how the church grew and progressed and evolved, or I guess we shouldn't say evolved. That's a bad word. Changed over time. What's the deal with Joey? What's the deal with Brigham? What went down a long time ago? Not too long ago.
Yeah, I mean, first part to mid 1800s. So, not as long as America's been around, but not much longer, not much less longer.
It's almost mid 1800s, so 175 years around there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, I like 1820 something. I think they're getting ready to have their 200th anniversary here soon.
Wow. That's a big deal.
Or they just did, yeah.
Their bicentennial, is that what they call that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might have happened a few years back, yeah.
Well, that happened in, well, I guess we don't know. Yeah. Okay, well, so then what's the deal? When did Mormonism start? How did it start? What's kind of the first thing on the timeline?
So what's interesting looking at that time in American history is there's a lot of interesting things going on spiritually in America during those 1800 years. There's a lot of spiritual activity going on that I would argue that was both legitimate and then counterfeit. You see revivals happening across this country. You see people really stirring up this idea of the end times. We're living in the last days. They start discovering more of dispensationalism, which isn't just invented then, but it was kind of rediscovered then. And it was super great. It's like, oh, wow, God's really moving. We're maybe living in the last days. You have the Jehovah Witnesses that begin. You have the Seventh-day Adventists that begin in that era. You have the LDS movement that begins. And all of them kind of have similar stories in that an individual had a spiritual experience and they start this religion or they start this denomination or this offshoot of Christianity. And so all that's kind of going on. But Joseph Smith, he's growing up in New York, and he's a young 14-year-old boy, the story goes, and he just wants to know which church is true. Because his mom's maybe like a Methodist and his dad's a Presbyterian or something, or a Baptist. The point is there's not spiritual cohesivity within his own family when it comes to some of these things. So he's kind of looking at all this and trying to figure it out. And he's thinking there must be a true church. So he goes out into this grove of trees and he prays. He gets down on his knees and he prays and he asks God. He says, I just want to know which church is true. And one of the accounts of Joseph Smith, it's called the First Vision, is that God the Father appeared to him along with Jesus Christ. They both have bodies of flesh and bone, according to Mormonism. And God the Father tells Joseph, he says, none of the churches on the earth are true. All of their creeds are an abomination to me. And I'm going to use you to restore the true church of Jesus Christ in these last days, in these latter day saints, the Church of Jesus Christ, Latter-day Saints. That's where this whole idea comes from. So Joseph gets this vision and he's thinking, this is pretty cool stuff. God just appeared to me. And now what? And several years pass, and then he gets visited by Angel Moroni, who says, I got some scriptures, some golden plates that are buried in the hill up there, Hill Cumorah, there in New York. I'm going to show you where those are at. You're going to dig them up and you're going to translate them in this book. These records, these writings are going to be another testament of Jesus Christ and the work that he did here in America, not just over in the Middle East in Jerusalem. So that's a bit of like rough overview of that. Now, next layer down that's important to know, and some might not like this, but it's 100% true. Joseph Smith was quite an interesting character. In the sense of would be really fun, charismatic young kid. There's accounts of him entertaining his family, late at night. They didn't have Netflix or Hulu back then, Jordan. Yeah. So late at night, you're sitting around after dinner at the fire or whatever. And there's these accounts of young Joseph getting up and telling these elaborate stories and acting out these things and making up all these different characters. So he was a clever guy. He was a smart guy. He seemed to really like entertaining people. And he really seemed to like captivating people's attention. He had charisma. It appears
he had charisma, what we call it.
He had riz.
Wow.
Yeah, people were attracted to him. And another thing, and this used to be debated, and I think you have to try pretty hard to explain this away too. It's just pretty clear in the history. He had a propensity or a hobby of treasure hunting. Of if you lost something, you could come to Joseph and his dad, and they would use these different tools to help find things. Divining stones that I mean, it's silly, but it's similar to like, Wonder Ball, a Super 8 ball. You ask it a question, you shake it. Instead, they'd have these different stones that they would use to try to divine and discern where, this lady lost her bracelet or where this hidden treasure might be. To my knowledge, there's zero account of them actually finding any treasure ever. But they were known for that. And that ties into all this. And again, a lot of LDS people don't like hearing that because they think it discredits Joseph Smith. And maybe it does, but for the benefit of the doubt, that doesn't take away from his story. Now, I can argue a lot of reasons why I don't think Joseph Smith is who he claimed to be, but trying to cover up his history is not going to be helpful in that. And that's an error, in my own opinion, that the Mormon Church made, and that they're doing the best they can to try to correct it. But it's too late for my generation, at least. And this even might be used against me somehow, but I'll say it anyway. And that is that I grew up with a polished or with an edited version of Mormon history. Okay. And then when I realized that maybe what I've heard and been taught isn't exactly what's true, and I started researching things online, and I learned that even from their own documents from LDS.org and Mormon sources, that the story's not quite like it's been told me. And I would bring these things up in seminary or in Sunday school class and stuff, and they'd get swept under the rug. Well, now, those very things that I was challenging that people were calling anti-Mormon, the Mormon Church is out there saying this is how it actually was. And what happened was, and it's kind of a surprise they didn't see this coming, but the internet really ruined them. Oh, because all of a sudden they were able to kind of control the narrative for so long. And I think they got lazy and sloppy and maybe even forgetful of a lot of themselves of what actually happened. All the information's there. You just keep reciting in each other and in your own thought circles the same stories that are polished when the reality's here. And people start uncovering this reality, and people are going, no, that's not it, but it is how it is. And now they realize there was this big contradiction. They're trying to get ahead of the ball now and saying, we're transparent, we're this. And honestly, my response to that is you're too late. You spent a decade or more when millennials like me were discovering this stuff. And there's a huge exodus of millennials out of Mormonism because of this. Now, someone out there that's watching this who might be LDS could look at me and go, Hagen, that's a really poor reason to leave the church. I mean, just because the leaders lied or just because they tried to kind of polish history where it wasn't, that still doesn't mean the church isn't true. And I agree with you. And I didn't leave the church because I discovered things about the history. I left the church because I got saved and Jesus changed my life. And then I discovered all those things. And then that really propelled me out of it. But that's not my reason for leaving. But I know that's the reason for a lot of people walking away from their Mormon roots. Yeah. And it's a bummer and it's sad because when you're in that and you start discovering these things and you bring them up to your parents or you bring them up to your leaders, you talk to your peers about it. When you're just raised in a system that's so much believe it, don't challenge it, and you start challenging a little bit, it's very easy to feel like you get pushed aside over here. But the most frustrating thing is what you're discovering is true and no one else seems to care. And it's like, what is going on here? How can this be? How can no one else care that Joseph Smith did this, believed that, taught that? How come no one else cares? And I know I'm a little off topic here, but I'm going to keep rolling. How come no one else cares that one of the big ones that I saw early on is completely true? It's the way that Joseph Smith died. I remember watching these videos produced by the Mormon Church, these inspirational movies of young Joseph in the Carthage jail, and he dies as a martyr. This mob came in and they overtook him and they shot him and he fell out of the window. It was this dramatic experience and they killed the prophet of God, and this is terrible. And it's true, Joseph Smith did get shot. But when you actually look at what happened there, it's very clear that he didn't just die as a martyr in a prison. He died in a gunfight because someone actually smuggled a gun into him.
Oh, wow.
So he wasn't just like there, a sitting duck in prison, and someone comes in and shoots him, this mob. He's shooting back at them. And not only that, this is huge too. Yeah. And I'll fight this one. He requests two things. He wants a gun and he requests wine to lift their spirits. Joseph Smith, who God gave the word of wisdom to, that says you have no business even touching alcohol, the day that he ends up dying, requests from jail wine to lift his spirits. And they'll say, well, we wanted grape juice. Here's the question. Does grape juice lift your spirits?
Depends on the grape juice.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's really good.
So, I bring all these little things up because this is where Mormonism screwed up big time. They built their foundation on the wrong guy. They built it on Joseph instead of Jesus. And they'll tell you our church is built on Jesus Christ. But here's the reality. And here's how you know. If you're LDS and you're listening, here's how you know your church is not actually built on Jesus like you think it is. If Joseph Smith crumbles, your religion fails. That's proof that your religion is not just based upon Jesus. It's Jesus at least and Joseph. Mm-hmm. If Greg Laurie, if Chuck Smith, if John Corson crumbles, that does not affect the reality of Christianity to us one bit. Mm-hmm. It's sad, but it doesn't affect the reality of Christianity. That's not how Mormonism works. If Joseph Smith crumbles, the whole system crumbles, because although you believe it or not, it's built on his back. It's built on his foundation. And I've even heard it said, Gordon B. Hinckley no doubt said it, a prophet in the Mormon Church when I was a kid, about the Book of Mormon and the work of Joseph Smith, that it is the foundation of our religion. And if it's not true, then this whole church is not true. It is the pinnacle. It is the hinge on which it all sits on. So the crumbling of the character and who Joseph Smith actually is a big deal to look into as someone who's curious into Mormon history.
Wow. Yeah.
Get me back on track.
Yeah.
Jordan.
Yeah. I was just going to ask. So you talked about way back when you talking about Joseph Smith and his saying how he saw these visions. You mentioned something about how there's one of the accounts. So are there multiple accounts of Joseph Smith seeing these visions?
There's one official account that everyone loves, which is essentially the story that I just told you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's multiple accounts in his own handwriting and his own diaries that he told different people. Mm-hmm. The earliest accounts is he went into the grove and an angel appeared to him and said, none of the churches are true. And then it evolved into, well, God appeared to him. And then it evolved into, well, the Father and the Son appeared to me. And you see that over time, the story evolves and gets better and better and better. Now, the Mormon apologists will say, well, the reason why Joseph didn't come right out and say God the Father and Jesus appeared to him in flesh and blood is because he's living in Protestant America where they believe in the Trinity and they wouldn't believe that God the Father has a body of flesh and blood. And Joseph knew that if we would bring that up, that he would just be discounted right away. So he kind of held that back until later on he felt more comfortable sharing it. That's the problem with apologetics is you can apologize, you can twist anything, kind of. Mm-hmm. So either, maybe, or that's not what happened. And the story did just develop over time. Mm-hmm. And he did realize that I can actually change this and this and this. And before I know it, I'm not just a young boy who had an experience with an angel. I'm a young boy who God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared to and told me I'm the modern day prophet and he's going to rebuild his church through me. Wow. That sells way more.
So was he kind of like telling these stories as he got like this church going, or like when did it go from being like Joseph Smith's like this? Was he like a pastor of a church?
I don't think he was ever like a pastor of like a church. I think what ended up happening is he starts to gain a bit of a following in this, what would be called the Restoration movement. And that's not unique to Mormonism either. That's something that happened in the 1800s. God's going to restore his truth in these last days. And it's, in a sense, that's where these other isms came out of, like SDA and Jehovah's Witnesses. They're kind of all similar in the sense of their restoration movements, in the sense of everyone else is wrong, we're the ones that are right.
Okay.
God's restored the real truth to us for the end times, and we're the ones who contain it. Mm-hmm. So that movement's kind of popular throughout the Americas, but he's got his own little branch of it. People are kind of being attracted to it. But once he actually gets the Book of Mormon translated and publishing that's where it really starts to gain steam.
Okay.
And he goes from New York to Missouri, Independence, Missouri, and that's where it really establishes Mormonism. As they're there and they're growing, there's a lot. So he dies in Missouri, Joseph does. And there's a lot of reasons why there was persecution that was happening to the LDS people. But honestly, the Mormon people are the only people in all of American history that literally had like a bounty out on their head from the government, where literally the U.S. government says you can kill Mormons and get these people. Wow. They would say that happened to us because we're just simple folks believing the truth. Mm-hmm. When you look into it, there was Joseph Smith ran for president. I don't know if people realize this.
I didn't know that.
He was very charismatic. He ran for president of the United States. It didn't work out too well for him. But he's literally believing that that God's gonna start his new church on this earth, his restored church, that it's gonna prevail, that it's gonna spread, and that Zion is going to happen.
What if he won?
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
That's crazy.
You want to talk about a timeline?
Yeah. Joseph Smith.
Think about that one.
Yeah. Okay.
So they get a lot of persecution. Joseph ends up getting killed. A lot of reasons. Polygamy starts to play into some things here now with Joseph Smith.
How early was that from the get-go? Mormonism was into that or not into that?
It's a little hard to tell. So he has his first wife, Emma Smith, and they're married. And then as time starts going, Joseph starts having more wives.
Which was common back then, right? I've heard that, or no, it's not common.
Not as common as you'd think, I don't think.
Okay.
So, but here's where it gets real hard, is he's lying about it.
Oh. Okay.
So there's proof of where he's got them, but publicly he's talking against polygamy. So he's secretly practicing for a season, and then he comes out into the open. And then there's even this whole thing of, the reason why he has to practice polygamy is because there's these single women who are now a part of this movement, this church, and they need a man to take care of them. Even if you want to just offer spiritually, they need a man as a covering, you will. So Joseph is going to sacrifice himself to be like, we need to bring them in. And
have you tried this tactic, Hagen? All you single ladies out there, if you need a covering.
But the problem with that is there's accounts out there, and again, you don't have to dig too deep, that Joseph was marrying women who still had husbands who were alive. Oh, so that's not just called polygamy; that's called polyandry, where he's marrying married women. So your excuse of I'm just trying to take care of them because they don't have a man doesn't really hold out. And there's all sorts of accounts. There's zero record of that Joseph had relations with any of these extra wives. That's kind of true. But it's like, how hard do you really have to think into this to think that there's probably not hanky-panky happening
going on? And is there anything with the ages of these ladies?
Sure. I mean, some were young, 16, maybe one was 14.
Okay.
Again, now that's a bit more common.
Sure. Okay.
back then.
Yes. Okay.
So like even my grandma's sister got married when she was like 16.
Okay.
Like my grandma's sister, like that's not that long ago.
Mm-hmm.
She was very young, got married to a guy a bit older than her at 16.
Okay.
That was kind of normal back then.
Yeah, but polygamy wasn't as common, but the youngie. Okay.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, polygamy is illegal in America
Oh.
during this time, which is one of the problems. This is why they're starting to have issues with the government, because now what we're practicing and believing doctrinally is butting up. It's not just polygamy, but there's a lot of stuff happening here. So Joseph ends up dying in Carthage jail, and now the big question is, who's the next guy? Because it's easy when it's the one guy who has the vision and he starts the movement, but who's going to carry this succession plan on? And here's where the first split in Mormonism happens, because Joseph's, I believe it's his brother, believes he should be the next prophet. Makes sense. Let's keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Brigham Young believes he's supposed to be the next prophet. Well, mainstream Mormonism goes with Brigham, and there's this first offshoot, which eventually now is called the RLDS Church, the Reformed LDS Church, which they have the similar prophet, Joseph Smith. They have the Book of Mormon because he translated it, but the RLDS Church does not recognize Brigham Young as the second prophet.
Do they have like their own different like line of prophets?
Yep.
Okay.
And they've actually become very liberal.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Like gay marriage and stuff like that.
Kind of like that, and for a little bit they were kind of good because they kind of threw out a lot of the more wackier Mormon doctrine, became a lot more mainstream Christian, but now they've kind of become a bit more progressive even in that world. So, so that little offshoot happens. Brigham Young decides, I need to be the guy who leads God's people to Zion. So they get a bunch of covered wagons. They all sell everything they have. What they do have, they load up and they head west from Missouri. And it's crazy. I mean, these guys literally covered wagons that you're pushing, hand carts. And this is a huge deal growing up as a Mormon. I forget how much people don't know about this part of U.S. history. Like every year we'd have pioneer days. We'd dress up like the pioneers. We'd have, my grandma and grandpa had these covered wagons just like they did back then. You'd put Dutch ovens in them. You'd cook. You'd do these things.
I did that growing up.
It's a big celebration. Yeah. I think it's the 24th of July. It's Pioneer Day. It's a huge deal in Utah, obviously, and then also this part of the country.
Yeah, I did not do that. No, yeah.
So they're heading west, and it was hard. And there's diary and journal accounts of the weather, of the travel, of leaving everything, of trying to find a better place for themselves, for trying to find a place where they can have religious freedom. All that's true, but they're looking for Zion. They get to Salt Lake, and Brigham Young goes, this is it. And they arrive in Salt Lake and they establish it. They build it out. Brigham Young was the first governor of Salt Lake, of Utah, of the state. It wasn't a state. It was part of the Mexico territory when they showed up. Mexico owned Utah. The Mormons fled Missouri to a new country, to Mexico, not New Mexico, to Mexico, a different country. It was Mexico territory. Then American history catches up. It becomes part of the United States. Brigham Young becomes the first governor of Utah.
Okay.
As well as the second prophet of the Mormon Church. And and I don't know, but just from how I read things and what I've heard, if Joseph Smith was charismatic, Brigham Young was that 10 times over. And way more, I think, authoritative. I think Joseph was much more likable, probably younger, much more smooth. I think Brigham Young was a much more, in a good way, kind of in a leadership way of just like a general and like, this is how it is. And I have this call in my life and we have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and just like a very kind of hard, more of a guy, but still very just like attractive.
Yeah. And so do Mormons still today see Salt Lake City as like Zion or God's city or center of whatever God, like, I don't know what they believe about like the end times and stuff, but it's like God's place on earth is Salt Lake City.
Yeah, kind of like Utah is Zion. And
Utah is Zion.
Yeah, and I mean Salt Lake, and then as it spreads out. with that, there's an interesting kind of lore in Mormonism, and that is that they believe the Garden of Eden is in Missouri.
Mm. Oh.
It's called Adam on Diamond.
Okay.
Adam on Diamond is in Missouri, and that comes from a teaching of Joseph Smith. He said, oh yeah, the Garden of Eden, where that all happened, it's right out here where we were living. And that's something Joseph was really good at. He was very clever at making the places where they were feel special and spiritual. And when you kind of see that, and now you read through the history and learn about these things, you're realizing how he's using his charisma. And again, for the benefit of the doubt, there's a part of me that believes eventually Joseph gets into this thing deep enough that he's believing it. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually really fascinated in this stuff, so much so that as I was traveling, I just started this podcast on the whole Jonestown cult that happened.
Okay.
It's like a 27-hour long podcast that this guy did going in depth. I'm really into this kind of stuff on how people how people can actually believe things. Like a mass group of people can really get sucked in and believe anything that their leader will tell them. And they really believe it. And to a point where they even, as the leader, maybe even believes it. So I think there's a point where Joseph Smith is not just this like conniving guy. Like I really think he thinks he's doing good.
Okay.
I really think he probably thinks he's called by God, at least for a season. There's also times when you start looking at the evolution of Joseph Smith where it looks like he realized people would pretty much eat anything he'd feed them. And it almost appears like he was like, I wonder how far I can take this.
Okay.
And he started coming up with more bizarre doctrine. And people are just like taking it and believing it. Mm-hmm. Just as much as they believe Jesus died on the cross, they believe in now this new thing that he just taught them. And he's like, whoa. And that kind of fed into it maybe and caused some interesting evolutions to what he taught, even Brigham Young on that. And that's where the modern Mormon Church has some problems, because they go back to what some of these early prophets taught that they know isn't true, that they know contradicts scripture. And they'll even say, today we don't believe that. But the problem is they believed it then, and they believed it was from God then. So now you have a prophet of God who's teaching doctrine to the group of people during that time that your prophet today says is not true. So there's an inconsistency there that you have to deal with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so how do they deal with that? Do they just kind of say that, like, oh, Joseph's still our prophet of God, but he just got some things wrong sometimes?
Sure. Well, they start playing the game.
No one's perfect.
They start playing the game that the Catholics play, which is hard. And that is, well, when are they a prophet?
Yeah, okay.
When they speak, when are they actually prophesying from God?
Yeah.
And when is it just Joseph the man?
Yeah.
Because there's this whole sermon that Joseph Smith gave called the King's Follett Discourse, that's written down, that's transcribed, where a lot of interesting ideas come from, like, God once being a man, and some different things. And a lot of people who get into Mormon history and challenge things go to that. And Mormon apologists can come in and say, well, he wasn't speaking as a prophet there. He was actually speaking at someone's funeral where he gave this sermon. But then it's just hard because, well, then when is someone a prophet? Mm-hmm. And can your prophet stand up in front of people and teach something from God and it not be from God, but then he does it again and it is from God?
Yeah.
Like, where does it, what's the word in Catholicism?
I don't know, the Pope's seat. Yeah. Peter.
Ex-cathedral or whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's where it gets really hard, and why, honestly, I don't advise Christians into using any of that LDS history to try to talk to or minister or debate LDS people, because it just gets so messy, and it's just like, well, and it's just so easy to throw something out that Joseph or Brigham might have said because of that excuse. Well, that was just something that he said in a book, or that was just something that he mentioned at this funeral once, but it wasn't actually doctrine of the church.
Yeah.
So
I've heard it said that there was like an evolution, like we've been talking about, of what Joseph Smith believed. So like people talk about how like kind of all the crazy stuff was kind of like towards the end, but he started off kind of like orthodox, like kind of like legit. Is that true? Or
yeah, I think so. Like starting out, he doesn't start out and he's not like, I want to create a religion that sees the nature of God differently, the deity of Jesus, even diminishes the work of Jesus on the cross as opposed to the cross of the garden, like modern day Mormonism does. He doesn't start out with any of that, I don't think. Yeah, all that develops over time. And then even if you or anyone listening would read the Book of Mormon, for the most part, this is a pretty Protestant book. Like this sounds like early American Protestant Christianity. The words that are used, the lessons that are being taught, are all pretty straightforward. Where it gets weird is when you get into the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price. These two other books that are in the Mormon canon are where the more bizarre, wacky, unorthodox, mainstream Christian Mormon ideas start to creep in that makes them who they actually are. So
how about, and I know we're kind of running out of time because we have to go to dinner because I'm excited for that. But how about, and this is kind of like something that maybe people who don't like Mormonism would throw out and probably wouldn't be too effective. But what's the deal with African-American people? Because like you talked about, they went west and then they became a state, right?
Yeah.
And then they joined America. And then at that point, things changed about their doctrine or...
Correct. Man,
oh, wait, no, that's polygamy.
Sure.
Yeah,
but it's all kind of, so polygamy... they stop practicing polygamy, I think, when they become a state.
Because it's illegal in America.
Yeah. We're done with that.
Because God said, yeah.
Yeah, they have really convenient revelations when it's beneficial for them. That's a great example. The other one is what you're talking about African Americans or blacks in the priesthood. So there's this idea in Mormonism that, well, there's two ideas. One that I've heard that many would not agree with today, that is that the curse of Cain from the book of Genesis was that he was cursed with black skin. So any descendant...
Or he became Bigfoot?
That's another one that my grandma would tell me, actually. And again, that's kind of lore, that's tradition. It's really... It's around there, but you're never going to hear someone definitively say that.
Yeah, I would say that.
If you were LDS, you'd love this kind of stuff. Yeah. One idea is that maybe Cain was cursed as Bigfoot and then he's walking around. I remember my grandma talking about these things to me, but the more accepted idea for a while is that the curse of Cain was the black skin. So anyone who is black is a descendant of Cain and they have a curse on their life. The other idea that ties in with that is in the Book of Mormon. It talks about how, because in Mormonism, we existed as spirit babies before we came to earth. It's called the pre-existence. In the pre-existence, those who were obedient and good got blessed to light and delightsome skinned people. The Nephites in the Book of Mormon.
I think you have delightsome skin.
Those who were rebellious were the Lamanites, the dark-skinned people.
The Lamanites.
So again, the idea comes from...
Got him.
In both of those ideas and doctrines, dark is associated with cursing. So there was this idea in Mormonism that the African American cannot hold the priesthood. Now that's a big deal because in order to go to the highest level of the celestial kingdom, and we'll have to talk about that on another podcast. Sure. In order to go to the highest level of the celestial kingdom, which is to live with Heavenly Father for eternity, you have to, as a male, hold the priesthood and go through the temple. And you, as a woman, need to be married to a worthy priesthood holder. So it's just like, okay, well, they just can't go into our special building. Spiritually, there's way more attached to that baggage than just you don't get to go and be a part of this religious ritual. It's literally you're a second-class citizen now and forever. Well, in the 70s, right after the Civil Rights Movement, God conveniently gave the prophet a revelation of, you know what? Let's let black people have the priesthood.
Wow.
And just
God's
like
so
that,
nice.
It changed, and they were able to get the priesthood, and now they're able to have
whatever.
Go to the celestial
kingdom
now,
sure. Yeah,
that's good news.
Yeah.
But that wasn't that long ago in history. I mean, the 70s, we're talking. So in the same era, in our circle where Raul Reese is getting saved, the Mormon Church is making a declaration that I guess black people can now have the priesthood.
Okay. Right on. So 50 years ago.
Yeah. And it's a black eye on Mormonism for sure. And then they'll do this thing, and I get it, because there's some things like this that we do in the Bible too, but they'll do this thing of, we don't understand God's ways all the time, and we just need to trust him. And although I can't explain what happened then, all I know is what it is now. And now anyone, any male, worthy male can have the priesthood, and we're grateful for that. And they just kind of, this is what they're good at, sweeping it under the rug. And I don't even like demand that you need to give me an answer. I just want you to tell me that it's wrong. I just want you to look at me and say, yes, this church that I believe is true has been wrong. And it's so hard to get to that point with them, because once you're there, again, once you get to one thing might be wrong, the system starts to crumble rather quickly. The cookie crumbles, Jordan. The crumble cookie crumbles.
Okay.
And
crumble cookies,
it opens a door up to where
Mormons create crumble cookies. Which I'm very grateful for. Yes, I'm pretty sure.
That might be, I think that's true.
Yeah, so good job. Thank you for your service. Yeah, keep going.
Sure. In the way that kind of Jews are good at certain things, it's kind of true for Mormons.
Okay.
They're good at business. They're good at being successful. They're good at working. They're good at raising families. There's an environment in which they're raised in that fosters really good Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right on.
So,
wow. Well, that's a lot of information. I think it's good that it's in the light and that people are just equipped so that when they hear things that are just myths from either side, people who are Mormons or people who aren't, because sometimes people who aren't Mormons make stuff about Mormons too.
Sure.
So it's good just to have the facts, the information. If you think that Hagen said anything wrong, you can email him at hagenmiller@ccsalmon.com and tell him what's up.
That's right. Yeah. And I hear so many silly things that Mormons will say, or non-Mormon people will try to say to bash Mormonism. Mormons weren't allowed to drink Coke or Pepsi, but then the Mormon Church invested money into one of those companies. And then all of a sudden it was fine for them to drink Coke or Pepsi. And to me, that's not true. I think they did invest money into it. But it was never a you can't and then you can. My mom drank Pepsi and Mountain Dew all the time growing up. Never drank coffee because that's in the Word of Wisdom. But Pepsi, Mountain Dew, all that stuff we drank growing up.
Yeah.
There's some families, Mormon families, that interpreted the Word of Wisdom as all caffeine. Therefore, they wouldn't touch even Pepsi or something. And my cousins were like that, and it's hard to believe. The only place I know that I've seen this is from these cousins. And that is that you can actually buy caffeine-free Pepsi. It's a can of Pepsi, and around the top of it, there's this maroon color band, and it says caffeine-free. I have no idea where they buy it, but it's out there. And they would drink it.
Yeah.
So,
and I would probably say, hopefully I think you would agree that when people who aren't Mormon throw out baseless claims or just throw out attacks like that aren't factual, it does way more harm than good. Because then you just have the mindset of these people are just making stuff up and they're just against me and they just hate me and they hate my religion. Yeah. And this just builds this persecutor mindset. So I think it's probably important to know your facts and not to just throw out things. Yeah. Because then it just hurts the cause for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. And there's a lot of good resources out there. If you're into the history of Joseph Smith, one is called a book called No Man Knows My History, which is a pretty good biography on him. That actually, I think, was even sold in it's like LDS approved. It's sold in Deseret Books is a Mormon publishing company. And they're all around Deseret Book Inc. Anything Deseret, anything Zion, anything Bonneville generally is associated with Mormonism somehow. Deseret Industries, DI, in Idaho Falls is a thrift store that's owned by Mormonism.
Yeah.
Deseret Books, Bonneville Insurance, Mormon. When I say Mormon company, I don't mean a Mormon who owns it. I mean the Mormon Church. It's a company of an offshoot. It's kind of messy the way they do these, but it's actually really smart too. It's an offshoot of it. Kind of this line over here of what's going on. But so anytime you see these words, especially living in the area that we live in, it's like, oh, Zion Bank. It's actually a Mormon bank, all these things. So
yeah, and that's something we'll have to talk about later because the Mormon Church is incredibly wealthy, which isn't a good or a bad thing.
It's just a reality.
Fact. Yeah, it's just like super, super crazy.
I would argue
wealthy.
it's a good thing for them. And
good for you. Yeah.
They did a really good job of managing money well and investing. They're really good at investing. They actually, I think they own the largest ranch in Florida. The LDS Church does, or they own one in Hawaii too, and it might be the largest one in Hawaii. But they own a lot of land in America. They buy a lot of agricultural land. They own businesses. They invest in the stock market. They have literally billions of dollars. And it's pretty impressive what they've been able to do over the 200 years that they've been in existence. So
wow,
my hat's off to them in that way.
Good for them.
Jesus says, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? So that is not the staple of success.
Yeah.
And I know there's plenty of Mormons out there that are zealous for God, that want to do what's right and want to just try to keep the commandments and be well-pleasing to your Heavenly Father. And that's a great heart that you have. And I hope you continue to listen as we go throughout this series. And I just want to challenge you in that your heart is great in that, but really think about the system that you're in and not just what you want it to be, but what it has been in the past and what it currently is now, and ask yourself, is this really what I made it? Or is the system, is the religion what I want it to be in my mind, but in reality, it's not quite adding up to what I wish? Because what I'm trying to offer you, not just today, but any day, through this, God's word, is that you can actually have a relationship with Jesus that's freed from all of the baggage that Mormonism has placed on you. So it's real, it exists. That's what got me when I was 16 years old. And it's available for anyone. I'm not trying to destroy your faith in Jesus. I'm not even trying to beat up on Joseph. I just want you to know what's actually taking place. And I want you to be unhindered and unbound to be able to experience all that Jesus has for you. And my challenge to you, and I know it's hard to hear, is it possible that that exists outside of the LDS Church?
Wow. Cool. Well, thanks for joining with us today. Hope you have a good one.
Bye.